Hi, my name's Ali Cain. I'm a freelance finance journalist and the host of the Buy That Business podcast. Each episode, we look at everything you need to know about buying and selling a business. Today, I'm joined by Ian Aldridge from Fin Business Sales. Welcome to the podcast, Ian.
Hi, Ali.
Now, opening a business is one thing, but selling it is another and often involves considerable time and effort. So, Ian, what are some of the mistakes that you see people make when they try to sell a business?
Well, there's a number of obvious mistakes that most vendors make. Number one is they often obsess around getting a number that they've fixated on for their business. And that could be completely arbitrary with relation to the actual value of the business. I'll give you an example. They may decide that they're not going to sell for less than $1 million. Well, $1 million is just a round number that they like the sound of rather than what the business is actually worth. So that can get in their way. The other thing they tend to do is link the number they need to what the business owes me. So I invested X, I owe Y, therefore I'm not going to sell for less than a certain number. And look, that can really get in the way of vendors getting a great transaction because the market ultimately decides what a business is worth. And if they get in their own way by saying no to something that actually was a pretty good deal, it can really damage, the transaction. So that's one. One of the other things is they tend to wait to sell the business when it's performing badly rather than planning a few years ahead with a sale in mind.
Yes.
And if they do that, they can actually have great trajectory and sell the business to a buyer who's looking for a business with great trajectory. Business owners get tired. They may own a business for 15 years, and in that 15th year, performance starts to drop off.
Yeah.
And it's only human nature to think, oh God, I've been doing this for 15 years and now it's going bad. Oh, I just can't put up with this. I'm going to get rid of it. That's the wrong time to sell. The right time to sell is when things are going really well. And certainly plan, have long-term planning with your team. And when I say team, I mean your accountant, your business broker, and your lawyer. And you can start doing that 3 years out. We can have conversations that help people organize themselves and the business so that it's at its peak for selling and so they can achieve the best result possible. And I guess the third thing would be not using professional help to sell the business. They think, I'll do it myself. This guy, one of my suppliers said to me, oh, I really like the look of your business. I'd like to buy it, and then trying to negotiate it yourself and, trying to organize the sale just to try and save a few dollars on commissions. It often is the wrong thing to do.
Do you find that people's egos get in the way, that they've got, the $1 million target in mind and they can't get out of their own way to accept, 750 or something like that?
I mean, that's quite prevalent. I mean, it's one of the main reasons it's good to have an independent arbiter like a business broker to negotiate on your behalf, because it takes the emotion out of the transaction. I mean, my job really is to get a buyer and a seller both equally unhappy with the deal they've struck. That means that we've probably got a pretty good deal for both.
Yep.
The buyer's paying a little bit more than he really wanted, and the vendor's accepting a little bit less than they wanted. It probably means it's a good deal. But it's understandable that people have egos. I mean, they built the business. Everyone's told them how wonderful the business is. But in reality, especially as businesses are, the more specialist a business is, the more likely it is that there's less buyers. The buyer pool for that particular business is not as deep because you need a special type of expertise to run a business like that successfully. And you just have to accept that as a vendor of a business. If you're extremely skilled as the owner of the business, then that means the person who's going to buy it needs to be extremely skilled, unless, of course, you're prepared to stick around for a significant period of time in the transition, which not everybody is.
So do you see some trends around that? And what's your advice? Do you think it's good to, have a clean break, or is it better for the previous owner to stay involved, and under what circumstances?
Yeah, look, one of my latest transactions was a steel manufacturer. They make school furniture and stadium seating and stuff like that. Two owners. Good business, very profitable, very consistent. The person buying the business was a genuine entrepreneur with some engineering experience, but not direct experience in that field. We negotiated a deal where both the current owners stayed for 12 months on a salary in addition to the sale. And a portion of the money was held back, only 20%, as an earnout based on retention of customers. I actually popped in to see them last week because it was the sort of final week of their 12-month sentence, as they call it. But actually, one of the guys has decided to stay on indefinitely working with the new owner because he enjoys the growth and he enjoys the atmosphere and the culture that the new guys created. And the other guys decided, because it was a retirement play for them anyway, that it's time to spend more time with his family. So it's very much up to the personalities involved. And I always say that if a buyer and seller don't like each other during a transaction, very unlikely that transaction is actually going to happen.
Yes, I can imagine. So you talk about earnouts. Tell me how they work.
I mean, it's very much a negotiation piece. I mean, vendors hate earnouts, and that's understandable. They want all the money on day one and a clean break walk away. But depending on the type of business it is, that's not often possible, particularly around the risk involved with losing customers, because customer relationships sit with the current business owner. Now, depending on the size of the business, that is less of a risk, and the diversity of the customer base. But I'll give you an example. I'm selling in fact, it actually goes through tomorrow. The settlement goes through tomorrow. A new home kitchen manufacturer.
Oh, wow.
Now, very good turnover, $7 million turnover a year. An absolutely great business, but two of his customers make up 80% of his sales. So from a buyer's perspective, the risk is extremely high that if they lose one of those customers, well, the transaction's not really going to be worthwhile for them. So what we've tried to do with that transaction is de-risk it. So the earnout, a 20% earnout, which is typical, is linked to the retention of those two key clients for a minimum period of 12 months. And the current owner, again, has agreed to stay in the business for a period of time, 12 months, in order to quarantine those customers and ensure that the relationship is handed off in a successful way so that the new owners feel confident that the transaction is going to be long-term worthwhile with those two key customers. So that's an example of how they work. The more diverse the customer base, the less need generally for an earnout.
Sure.
So last year I sold a plastic pipe fabricator, and he had 200 customers, and no one of those was bigger than 5%.
Wow, great business.
Very little need for an earnout in that particular case. However, there was still the owner still stuck around for 3 months in the transition in order to upskill the new owner in the systems, processes, and to make sure that they felt confident in the skills they needed.
Did those sorts of mechanisms change during COVID? So what happens when a catastrophic event like that happens and it changes the terms of the arrangement?
Well, it's been an interesting time, obviously, in business sales. I mean, for our office, I can only speak empirically about our office. The last 12 months has been the best 12 months we've had for selling businesses. We've had extremely high inquiry on all businesses. I mean, my office doesn't sell hospitality or retail businesses, which is quite fortunate because obviously they're the most affected. We tend to focus on freight forwarding, transport, logistics, manufacturing, professional services, which have been less affected. So that's we've seen a lot of cash injected into the macro economy, and a lot of people who used to sort of trawl their way into the office 5 days a week suddenly sat at home with more money than they've got, realising that actually this sort of feels like working for myself. Maybe I should try that. But also demand for products. There was pent-up demand for a lot of products. So a lot of businesses that I'm dealing with have had their best ever year in sort of 2021.
Wow.
So with regard to behaviours around COVID, interestingly, buyers are out there with a belief that they're going to pick up businesses a lot cheaper because of the effect, but actually that's not been the case. Oh. We've seen businesses selling for closer to the asking price, in addition to more businesses selling. And vendors have got a very downbeat view of what their business is worth because they think that people are going to be looking to pick up a bargain because of the COVID effect. So it's actually been the perfect storm for getting people to meet in the middle because there's low expectations on both sides, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So before we talked about, it being a 3-year period to prepare a business for sale, what happens in those 3 years? Talk me through the process.
It's almost a bit of consultancy work that we do. Generally unpaid, but with the view that we're building a relationship with the client. Depends on how much help they want. I mean, some people, once they start working with us, really would like regular help to help them improve their business ready for sale. But for some people, it's just an initial meeting to say, and I'll give you some examples. As a business owner, if you can have the business as reliant on you, as least reliant on you as possible, you make your business more valuable. So we'd look at the team and we'd look at the roles that the current team are actually fulfilling and the role of the owner or directors. I mean, if it's a very large business, they'll have a general manager anyway, and that's the perfect scenario. But on a sort of a small to medium-sized business without a general manager, how can you as the owner mitigate against the business relying on you? And look at your team around you. How can you upskill them? How can you train them? How can you get them to do what you do? So in reality, you could walk away from the business for 3 months and the business you'd come back 3 months later and it's running exactly the same, if not better than when you left. So that would be number one.
That's the dream.
I'd say another thing that people need to do is look at their own business through the eyes of a buyer.
Sure.
So if you advertise your business for sale and, everyone, they've completed confidentiality agreement and they know the name of the business, the first thing that person's going to do is go to the internet and they're going to look up your business online. They're going to look at your website. They're going to look on Facebook. They're going to look on LinkedIn. They're going to look on Instagram and, all these electronic versions of your business that are out there and see how digitally fit you are. Now, if you're not digitally fit to be out there, it's going to give them a very, very poor first impression of your business. And they're probably going to think to themselves, I'm not sure that this is the right business for me.
Yeah.
I mean, some buyers will see that as an opportunity, of course, which is the right way to look at it. But the mindset of a buyer is, I want the perfect business and I don't want to pay much money for it. So you've got to try and give them that. Another area that we would help you work on as a vendor would be, are your financials clean, simple, easy to understand, with no sort of hidden nasty surprises? Now, that's why we talk about working with the team, and the team is your accountant as the vendor, and potentially down the line, your lawyer or a lawyer that we can sort of refer you through to. Your bookkeeper's an important person as well. Just making sure, for example, have you got training manuals in your business? Have you got employees with formal qualifications that you have helped them get that you can leverage as IP in that business to make it more valuable? Are the systems and processes in your business easy for anybody to understand? Have you got contracts with your customers? If you haven't, could you get them? Because one of the first questions I get asked is, has the business got contracts? Well, look, we all know that most contracts aren't really worth the paper that they're written on, because people will find a way of getting out of them. But it's better to have something than nothing. And if you've got a long-term relationship with your client that's been ongoing for 10 years, well, they may be open to that anyway.
Yeah.
So there's lots of these little things that you can do in order to move your business into something that seems a lot more attractive.
How tough is it to find the right buyer?
Well, that's the beauty of being in a group like Finn. We've got a huge network of buyers on our database. We've got, I believe, more than 50 offices within the organisation now. Each of those offices has a database of buyers that have inquired on various businesses, and we've got access to those. And it's very easy for us to interrogate the system to find people who've inquired on businesses over $1 million, for example, or manufacturing business, for example, or they're looking to buy an accountancy practice. So we can then contact those people very quickly, and that's a very useful way of us starting the process.
Interesting.
Advertising in the right places is extremely important, and online is where it's at, as you would expect. Nobody advertises in the newspaper anymore. Although we sold in our office, we sold an $18.5 million business last year, and we did advertise in the Financial Review to get that one sold. So, but that's unusual, to be honest. And I guess finally, trade buyer approaches are a real key mechanism for us. So we get one of our girls in the office to research a very comprehensive list of potential trade buyer targets and say to them, look, we've got a business with these characteristics. We're not naming the business until they've completed a confidentiality agreement, but it's got these characteristics. It would be good for you as an integration piece. You can probably unlock some synergies. It's got, this turnover, this profit, this many people, and a diverse customer base, for example. And we get, I would say, for every 10 letters we write to a trade buyer, we would probably receive at least 2 responses. So, we'll get 20 responses from a trade buyer list of 100, which is, it doesn't mean that one of those is going to buy it. Some of them are just having a sticky beak, but it's certainly very effective.
So what should you do if you find that you can't sell your business?
Improve it, keep it and improve it so that it becomes more attractive would be my best advice. Look to maybe grow it so that you can afford to put it under management. So that, look, most people, the reason most people are looking to sell their business is they want to retire. In Victoria, it's been recently, a lot of people want to leave the state of Victoria because it's, the amount of lockdowns and stuff we've had. And personally, as a POMS point of view, the weather's not great either. But a lot of people are looking to move on with the rest of their life.
Yes.
Now, therefore, keeping the business and growing it isn't always an option. They want to get out. Maybe a relative is sick and they need to care for that relative, so they want to sell their business. But if you can find the business to be big enough that you can put somebody in charge of it, and then maybe you're only going in, 1.5, 2 days a week to work on the strategy with the person who's running the business on your behalf, that's an option. And the other thing, of course, is you can liquidate the business and, shut it down. And unfortunately, that does happen because not every business will sell.
Yeah.
And that's part of the honest conversation that we have to have with vendors when we meet with them. And we won't sell every business either. If I go and see a business and I think to myself that it's extremely low quality, hard to understand with poor financials, then I'd probably pass on that opportunity because we would be, unfortunately, putting the vendor through what is an emotional process with very little percentage chance of a positive outcome.
I understand. So we're coming to the end of our time together, Ian. So if you had one piece of advice for someone thinking about selling their business at the moment, what would it be? Well,
I'm going to say this, aren't I? Use a broker. And if you're in Victoria, make sure that broker's me. But I do think it's very important to get shop around. I'd be asking my broker, my business broker, how many businesses have you sold? How long have you been business broking? Do you do anything else in addition to business broking for income? And if the answer to those questions is, I've only been doing it for 12 months, I've sold 3 businesses, and yes, I do X, Y, and Z as well, then you should think very carefully before appointing somebody like that. For me, this is my only source of income. I work on it full time, and I also limit the amount of clients that I manage at any one time because it's all about making sure that people get good customer service and the best possible chance of actually being able to sell their business. So do your research, speak to your accountant, get your accountant to speak to the broker, because accountants deal with money every day of the week. That's what they're there to do. And if your broker doesn't understand your business in the same way your accountant does, then that's going to be a problem as well. So get the right advice.
That is good advice indeed. So thank you very much for joining me today, Ian. If any of the viewers would like to get in touch to suggest a podcast topic or to give us any feedback, please use the links at the bottom of this podcast. And thanks very much for listening. Goodbye and see you next time.